Inglourious Basterds, not unlike 300, is an examination of propaganda. The way a compelling story can make us sympathize with representatives of a monstrous ideology, and the way the power of storytelling can reinvent and reshape history, ending with a group of Jewish American suicide bombers shooting Hitler in the face inside of a burning movie theater. This was the first in what Tarantino was at the time calling his spaghetti western trilogy, named for the old Italian westerns that he grew up on in the 1960s. The messaging of Bastards, the propaganda, if you will, is a powerful one. A group of rugged, Byronic Americans are heroically killing Nazis, even while the film subtly compares America and its colonial origins to the Nazi war machine.
And our battle plan will be that of an Apache resistance.
Explosives still around the ankle, still ready to explode, and your mission? Some would call it terrorist plot.
This comes center stage in Django Unchained primarily through the masterful casting of Christoph Waltz. The only sympathetic white character in Django is not an American, the German man played by the same actor playing the Nazi Hans Landa in Inglourious Basterds. He's constantly shown to be horrified by the barbarity and viciousness of slavery, depicted as being a uniquely American sin.
Your boss looks a little green around the gills for a blood sport like fighting.
Nah. He just ain't used to seeing a man ripped apart by dogs is all.
You are used to it.
I'm just a little more used to Americans than he is.
Could you please stop playing Beethoven? Take your hands off the harp.
And this time the historical injustice being addressed is our own, and instead of a group of Jewish soldiers killing Nazis, we get a black freed slave turned gunslinger killing white slavers in the pre-Civil War South. Django does everything that Inglourious Basterds does turned up to 11, and in a way that feels like the most perfect possible version of a Quentin Tarantino western. Any catharsis we get in Django is short-lived though. The Hateful Eight takes everything that Inglourious Basterds and Django told us and turns it on its head. Far from the escapism of rewriting history, the lies and the propaganda are dragged into the light, and we're given a stark, painful look at the American racial divide, past and present.
John Ruth, I hate to be the one to break it to you, but ain't nobody in Minnie's haberdashery ever corresponded with Abraham Lincoln.
Some of the propaganda you might have heard in what we formerly called news over the past few years is this idea that the Civil War wasn't really about slavery, but rather about economic differences between the northern and southern states. And while this is bullshit, it is true and worth pointing out that the North did not go to war with the South to end slavery. The northern states, one by one, moved to end slavery after it became economically convenient to do so. Lincoln's primary goal was to preserve the Union, and it's important to be aware that the Emancipation Proclamation was not the legal end of slavery in the United States. It was a strategic move to encourage blacks in the South to rise up and join the Union. The Hateful Eight points out that black Americans and poor whites in the South, history aside, have a lot more in common with each other than they do with the white elites who are running things.
You really think I'm in cahoots with that fella or her?
That's my problem, boy. I don't know. And until I do, you in chains.
You got me at a bit of a disadvantage.
Keeping you at a disadvantage is an advantage I intend to keep.
And that men will put race aside when they have to if it means coming together to punish a woman.
Now that was a nice dance.
That sure was pretty.
While not technically part of the Western trilogy, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood does provide a nice little thematic addendum to the concepts explored in the previous three films. It tells us that while we can't change history and the painful realities it's brought us to, sometimes we can escape from it into a movie. Just for a little while. I also have to respect anyone who responds to kink shaming by literally putting him on the glass. I have a hard time ranking movies, to be honest. If I were to redo this video next week, I would probably have an entirely different list for you. And if you're gonna compare a Tarantino movie, you compare it to every other movie's ever been made, not made by Quentin Tarantino. I think every movie he put out this past decade is unique and extraordinary in its own way. I picked Django Unchained to represent the lot because I think it represents the purest form of what Tarantino was trying to do, and ultimately because it made the biggest impression on me out of any movie I've seen in the past 10 years. There are so many parts that I love. The blood splattering the cotton, symbolizing the poison in our nation's wealth. Calvin Candy having rotten teeth because he's literally a grown kid with no impulse control living in a candy land.
Where is my beautiful sister?
Stephen running to Calvin's side after Schultz gunned him down because he knew it was the safest place for him to be found if the whites in the plantation turned against the slaves. And holy shit, this is a badass soundtrack.
Now I don't take pleasure in the man's pain, but my wrath will come down like cold rain, and there won't be no shelter, no place you can go.
But I think my favorite detail was this.
Seem like white folk ain't never had a bright idea in their life. Was coming up with all kinds of ways to kill your ass. Now, mind you, most of them ideas had to do with fucking with your foreign parts. Now, that may seem like a good idea, but truth is, when you snip a nigga's nuts, most of them bleed out in about 7 minutes. Most of them. More than most. Then I says, shit, five. The niggas we sells to LeQuint Dickey got it worse than that. And they still saying, let's whip him to death. Or throw him to the Mandingo. Feed him stone side dog. I said, what's so special about that? We do that shit all the time. Hell bells. The niggas we sell to LeQuint Dickey got it worse than that. Lo and behold, out of nowhere, Miss Laura come up with the bright idea of giving your ass to the LeQuint Dickey Mining Company. And as a slave of the LeQuint Dickey Mining Company, henceforth till the day you die, all day, every day, you will be swinging a sledgehammer, turning big rocks into little rocks. Now, when you get there, they're gonna take away your name, give you a number and a sledgehammer, and say, get to work. One word of sass, they cuts out your tongue. They good at it, too. You won't bleed out. Oh, they does that real good. They're gonna work you all day, every day, till your back give out. Then they're gonna hit you in the head with a hammer, throw your ass down the nigger hole. And that will be the story of you, Django.
That no act of torture or cruelty that the individual could think of could ever be as monstrous or as dehumanizing as the cold efficiency of any venture that puts profit on human flesh in a capitalist society. You know, the first piece of what you could call abolitionist propaganda that really had an effect on people in the United States wasn't a play or a poem or some grisly depiction of a slave execution. It was the blueprint of the inside of a slave ship that showed the coffin-sized levels that human beings were crammed into for months at a time to maximize the profits for each trip across the Atlantic.